Well, now, honey, we've been over this and over this, and there's what's right and there's what's right, and never the twain shall meet.
Those were the brilliant words of H.I. McDonough, who is, of course, from the classic film Raising Arizona. Hi, everybody. This is Dacia. This is Classical Classroom, and you are about to listen to part one of a two-part series about the music of the Coen Brothers films. So when I sat down with my coworker, Craig Cohen, to record this episode, it was originally going to be one episode, but it was such an epic conversation that we actually had to break it up into two. So anyway, this first episode covers 1984 through 1994. That's Blood Simple to the Hudsucker Proxy. And you know, in addition to amazing music, the Coen Brothers films are also known for great characters and for being totally quotable, with lines like,
"Hey, these blow up into funny shapes at all?"
Well, no, unless round is funny.
And
"You're not just telling us what we want to hear."
No, sir, no way.
Because we just want to hear the truth.
Well, then I guess I am telling you what you want to hear.
Boy, didn't we just tell you not to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then.
And who could forget...
Son, you got a panty on your head. You drive fast.
So it would be super obvious for us to just turn this intro into a funny quote-a-thon. But we're above such audio parlor tricks, and instead we'll just say,
"You go right back up there and get me a toddler. I need a baby high. They got more than they can handle."
And leave it there. Anyway, remember to subscribe to, rate us and review us on iTunes, and enjoy the episode. There's a rumor going around that classical music can be hoity-toity. But here in the Classical Classroom, we beg to differ.
Beethoven 5. Isaiah is shaking with excitement over here.
I mean, there's just so many great parts of the opera.
He asked me to play his favorite spot in the first movement of the Brahms. And then he said, I started using those licks in my guitar solos.
How to be classical music rock stars, because there's not enough of that in this business.
Occasionally, I would plug in the mandolin to my distortion pedals.
I don't change my voice.
Talking to classical music voice.
I'm playing classical music now. I mean, it's the same 12 notes. That's what's so cool about it.
I'm Dacia Clay, a classical music newbie, and I'm trying to learn all I can about the music. Come learn with me and the classical music experts I invite into the Classical Classroom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Classical Classroom. I'm Dacia Clay, and here with me today is Craig Cohen. Craig is the host of Houston Public Media's daily public affairs program, Houston Matters. By the way, Houston Public Media is the station that Classical Classroom was born from. Craig has also hosted classical music programs on 3 stations, one of which he was the program director at. He was a film critic on a TV show called Critics' Choice. He also hosted a TV show called iZone, which introduced independent films. Most importantly for our purposes today, though, from what I understand, Craig, you've interviewed a Muppet?
Oh, I've interviewed multiple Muppets.
Which Muppet?
Well, the ultimate Muppet, Kermit the Frog.
What?
Intrepid reporter.
Oh, my God.
Yes. A number of years ago on Sesame Street, one of their storylines involved a hurricane coming through town. And I got wind of that. And so I called up Sesame Workshop. And I said, is there any chance? I was hosting I was a local host of Morning Edition in Central Illinois, and I wanted to interview Kermit. I wanted him to be our on-site reporter telling us about this hurricane. And they put me in touch with the gentleman who we will say is Kermit's companion, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, let's do it. And so I wound up recording 2 interviews with Kermit, one as the hurricane was bearing down on Sesame Street, and then one in the aftermath, in which point Big Bird's nest was destroyed.
No.
Yes, and the rest of the street, they all came together to help him rebuild.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It was a blast.
Oh my God. I had no idea. We would have been talking about this for the last couple of years that we've been working together. So, but seriously, we're going to be talking about something today that we both love. that's not Muppets, the music of the Coen Brothers movies.
Well, I just love the movies, first of all. I'm a big fan of Joel and Ethan Coen's films, which are so, at times...
We should say there's no relation, right?
No,
I'm assuming. Different spelling.
Different spelling.
Okay.
I have no connection whatsoever to them that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Joel and Ethan Coen, the Coen Brothers.
Well, they really are a movie-making team in that while one is listed as the writer and another one is the director or producer in the credits of all of their films, the truth is anybody that has worked with them, they really are like this collaborative two-headed beast on set.
Yeah.
And they just come up with brilliant ways of bringing you into a period of time, a film concept, a structure, a something. You just kind of, as you start to watch a film, you're like, that's quintessentially a Coen Brothers film, and yet each one of their films has unique settings and characters and situations, but there is something about it, the way they photograph, the way they tell a story that just draws you in.
Well, and the music is such a huge part of that, and surprisingly to me, there's a lot of classical music in these movies. So we should start from the beginning with regard to the music, and I think talk about. It's Carter Burwell, who's the guy who scores most of their films,
and
right?
he is a 20th and 21st century composer primarily of film scores.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say this is maybe slightly further afield from classical, but you know what? You've talked about John Williams and Star Wars, and I am totally on board with that.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with that, let's talk about
totally
Carter Burwell.
Okay with that, yeah.
So this is a native of New York who studied animation and computers at Harvard, but was moonlighting as a keyboardist in punk bands. And that's where the Coen Brothers found him.
Wow.
While they were preparing to shoot their first film, Blood Simple, back in 1984. Mm-hmm. So they hired him to score the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there are going to be folks who have not seen some of the films that we're going to talk about. And I'm always worried about the whole spoiler thing, so I don't want to give too much away about any of these films because the less said, the better.
Definitely.
Particularly when it comes to the kind of stories these guys tell. But let's start with IMDb's description of Blood Simple because it's hysterical. It says, a rich but jealous man hires a private investigator to kill his cheating wife and her new man, but when blood is involved, nothing is simple.
Oh my God, somebody got paid to write that.
Absolutely.
That's great.
But this is, right out of the gate, a terrific film, great performances by Frances McDormand, Dan Hedaya, who was Nick Tortelli on Cheers, Emmett Walsh, Dickie Dunn from Slapshot, one of my all-time favorite films, John Lithgow's dad in Harry and the Hendersons, if you remember that. Yeah. This was probably Walsh's most celebrated role. He plays a really creepy guy, and he does it so well. Burwell's music, though, let's get to that. Carter Burwell establishes that this is film noir, establishes that atmosphere, even though the film takes place in a contemporary setting in 1984. He uses piano and synthesizers to sort of set the mood, and then there's this subtle percussion that is just sort of constant that creates this sense of forward momentum towards some sort of impending doom.
Let's hear that.
Subtle, but you can hear like this little, almost like a ticking clock in the background, and it's just like maybe a little cymbal touch.
I was tuning into that too. I was smiling because you can hear that this is from the 80s.
Yes.
Even though they kind of like, the Coen Brothers are really good at making films that are sort of ageless. in a lot of ways. Like you can definitely hear that synthesizer.
And 84, because I feel like this could have been in Terminator.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. All right. So this is Carter Burwell's
his first foray
work with Joel and Ethan Coen. And
again, he hadn't done film scores
Yeah.
to date. This was like I said, they found him in a punk band and said, "Hey, you want to try doing this?"
It's so random.
Yeah.
I really love the story of like how that went down. So this is Blood Simple, and this is I saw this one a long time ago, but I remember how just sort of dark and ominous everything felt.
So much of it is set in this seedy bar, and it's just like a dive out in the middle of nowhere, and everything about it just says, these are skeevy people doing skeevy things, and this is not going to end well for anybody we like.
And with this music, somebody had a mullet in that film.
Yes.
Almost definitely. So where do we go next? What's the next?
Let's move now to 1987 and Raising Arizona.
Oh yes,
great. I have to say this about Raising Arizona. First time I saw this film, I did not like it. I couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
Then I thought, well, let me give it another shot, and I watched it again, and I kind of chuckled.
Yeah.
Then I watched it a third time, and I laughed out loud. And then subsequent times, I find it now a hysterical film.
Yes, it's true. It gets funnier with age.
Yes.
I was just talking to another one of our coworkers today about this, and we started just, throwing out lines from the film. And there are so many. The entire film is just like one-liners.
Oh,
just like quotable one-liners.
Well, I'm going to give you one, which is they got more than they can handle, which is kind of the whole setup here.
Yeah.
Holly Hunter's a cop. Nicolas Cage is a criminal. They fall in love, and they steal one of the Arizona's quintuplets, saying that the Arizonas, who are this well-to-do couple, they got more than they can handle. This is a modern slapstick comedy. It's bizarre. It's goofy.
Yeah.
There's that great sequence where they rob a store and then they have to go back and pick up the Huggies that are lying in the road.
Yes.
So how do you portray modern slapstick musically? According to Burwell, Ethan Coen was concerned that this film might not be, quote, groovy enough for him. But Burwell, and this is on his website, carterburwell.com, which you should totally check out if you dig his music, says he doesn't have any affinity for country western music, which is what they were looking for here.
Yeah.
But what he did was he found this Polish singer named, and I'm going to butcher this name, Mieczyslaw Litwinski.
I feel like that's really convincing.
Okay.
I believe it. Yeah.
Thank you. And this guy could yodel really, really well.
Yeah.
And you figure, okay, well, you got to start with a yodeler, right? That guy can yodel.
Yeah.
He also found a banjo player who may or may not have been, according to his website, one of the Coen Brothers' optometrists. And then he found a couple of percussionists, and he sort of threw a band together. And they sort of do this improvised score that uses a lot of household objects to make music. They use vacuum cleaner hoses, they use jars and hubcaps, and it sort of creates this unique and goofy sound that really fits the wackiness
Yeah,
on
it's
screen.
a lot like An American in Paris. He employed the use of the horns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just actually bringing the sounds of what was going on into the music.
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. It's so great because it's interesting that, this guy comes from punk music, obviously not a country music fan.
Right.
And, this is his take on it. This is...
Yeah, I don't know if it's a compliment or an insult or what it is, but it works for the movie because
totally does.
it establishes this is going to be out of left field. Whatever it is you're going to see is way off the beaten path.
Yeah, it really does sort of lend it that bizarro world feel and this movie I feel like is such a departure from Blood Simple, and I mean you could kind of see the style that was going to emerge from the Coen Brothers a little bit. You could see like nuggets of it in Blood Simple. In Raising Arizona, you really start to see that sort of stylized Coen Brothers thing where it's, it is a slapstick, but there's like this sort of dark cloud hanging over the movie too.
Well, they seem to create a lot of films about lovable losers.
Yeah.
People that have no direction, aren't really, or are letting the winds, the fates take them wherever they'll go, for better or worse.
Yeah.
In some cases for much, much worse, and we'll get to some examples of that.
Yeah. Oh my God, listen to that. I can't believe I've never noticed that this turns into Beethoven's Ninth. That's crazy.
Yeah, this music is great because even if it's not all that precise, that works.
Yeah.
It also helps that it's got to be goofy because you've got Nicolas Cage on screen.
With his crazy hair.
The hair and the mustache. Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, my God. If you guys haven't seen this movie, go watch it, like Craig said, at least 3 times.
Yes, because the first time you may not get on board with it.
Yeah.
Repeated viewings, it's worth it.
It's amazing. Okay, so where are we going next? We got a lot to fit in here.
Yeah, let's go to 1990 and Miller's Crossing. This is another fine film that a lot of people haven't seen. With Gabriel Byrne as the sort of hero / anti-hero. Albert Finney's a mob boss. John Turturro begs for his life better than anyone you'll ever see on screen. This great sequence where he's in the woods and he's looking up at Gabriel Byrne and he says, "Look in your heart. Look in your heart." Oh, it's very moody. And this film is all about the mob. It's about betrayal. That part reminds me a little bit of Blood Simple, but it's a period piece, and so Burwell goes with a full orchestral score with this one, aiming for what he calls big and sentimental and lush.
Okay, let's hear some of that. Still rocking the synthesizers here.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can hear it builds and it grows and there's a warmth, which is really interesting because it's a very violent film.
Right, yeah. I remember seeing it. Lots of blood.
But it works.
Yeah.
Look in your heart. Look in your heart.
I can totally see John Turturro saying that. I love the big swell in the music.
Sort of takes you you're back in time.
Yeah.
You have this sense of this has got to be early mid-20th century. There's an immigrant culture, a new America, but it's also very violent and very dark, but also very warm.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah, totally. All right.
While we're talking about the early mid-20th century, that's a period. I know this. We're talking about a stretch of 30 or 40 years here, but kind of from the 1930s to the 1960s seems to be right in the Coen Brothers' wheelhouse. A lot of their films end up in that period of time.
Yeah. I wonder why. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense because there's so much cultural change taking place.
And one end of the spectrum is when they were kids, and probably the other end is when their parents were kids. That's usually when a lot of people, I think, if auteurs that are telling stories have a tendency to fixate either on, I think, what their own experience is, or they want to try and understand what their parents went through.
Yeah, you go with what you know or are trying to know. And I think what's so interesting about their films is that I said that they were timeless, but then I was thinking, well, but they're all like Miller's Crossing, like O Brother, Where Art Thou? Like they're sort of almost caricaturizing the time periods that they're set in. So they're very much using that. But I guess what I mean by being timeless, they're sort of telling stories in a Homeric way. Like
they're parables. A lot of what they do are parables. Yeah.
They resort to, they use archetypes a lot in their films. Their characters are usually symbolic of something. And so they're telling these tales that are set in a time period, but honestly, they could be taken out and, set in any, like, it could be the Iliad, it could be the Odyssey.
Well, in fact,
one
of them is, and we will get to that one.
Oh, yes. I can't wait.
But let's, let me quickly mention Barton Fink from 1991.
Okay. Yeah.
It's another period piece that sort of encapsulated the Hollywood system of the early 1940s. You had John Turturro sporting a look that only J.J. Abrams could love, the sort of Jufro with the black round glasses.
Totally.
He's a writer who needs to hammer out his scripts. He's seeking something deep in a shallow world, and he's put up in the hotel from hell.
Yeah.
There's no other way to describe it. He has a neighbor, John Goodman, who shows up in a lot of the Coen Brothers films, who has this friendly, outgoing nature about him, but that sort of belies what. Again, I don't want to give away too much, but let's characterize him as a sort of fallen angel of a character. I'm not saying he's the devil. He's not the devil. That's not what I mean. But he's sort of revealed over time to be a far more shocking character. There's something about his character that unfolds that either you see coming and you're fascinated by, or you don't see coming at all and you're really fascinated by. By the end, there is this sort of transition from you think you're in a wacky Hollywood send-up kind of a film to what I might almost characterize as horror.
Yeah. Which that is so the Coen Brothers, that sort of move from light to dark and back again so easily that kind of is jarring as it very much keeps you on your toes as a viewer.
And there's a piece that Carter Burwell writes in this called Barton in Flames.
Okay.
And we'll just leave the title where it is.
Okay.
You hear those dissonant notes? That's anytime you want to kind of demonstrate something visually askew. You can show it musically, too. Something's going wrong. And in this film, it starts like you feel like you're on solid footing, and it falls away thematically all the way through this film.
It sounds like they've gotten fancy, too. They're using an actual orchestra.
Yeah. Let's skip ahead now to 1994 and The Hudsucker Proxy, which is one of maybe my favorite of the Coen Brothers films, and I think I'm in a distinct minority on that front. I think they're sort of mixed critical response to this film.
This I've only seen parts of, so you're going to be introducing me to some new stuff.
All right, well then let me start by just the basic plot of this. Okay. It's a fantasy film. It's set in 1955, presented in a classic Hollywood standard film style. This harkens back to the Preston Sturges films, the Hollywood films of the 30s and 40s, where you were talking about archetypes before, these classic Hollywood character tropes.
Yeah.
You have a hero who is innocent, just arrived in the city, kind of maybe a little dopey too, but certainly not worldly. But that innocence belies something. There's more to him than meets the eye. That's the hero. The villain is dastardly and is typically presented as that all-knowing figure crunching on a cigar. Paul Newman plays that part as Sidney Musburger. The love interest in this case, again, we're talking about 30s, 40s Hollywood standard film. You know what this is. A fast-talking career gal, And she talks like this, and she talks really fast. And there's a guy that she works with named Smitty, and it's got all of that, right?
Yeah.
So the sets, the characters, the faces in this film are all outsized. And so you need music to match that. And this is where the Coen Brothers and Carter Burwell, who did the accompanying score, turned to classical music.
Okay.
And they use a couple of famous compositions by Aram Khachaturian.
Okay.
Khachaturian was one of the most celebrated 20th century Russian composers. The name may not be familiar to you.
I've heard the name, but we've never actually done anything on the show about him.
He's mostly remembered for a couple of ballets. Guyana, which is a 4-act ballet, and I may have mispronounced that slightly, which he composed in 1942, and it tells the story of an Armenian woman who discovers her husband's engaged in treason. It had a really nationalist quality to it when it was first put forward, when it was first composed. The plot, though, was changed a number of times over the years to sort of de-emphasize that and focus on the romance instead. But the work that came out of Guyana that's most remembered, and which the Coen Brothers use in Hudsucker, is Khachaturian's Saber Dance.
Okay.
Now, Saber Dance is this kinetic, fast-moving, like 2-3 minute long dance. You will know it instantly when you hear it. In fact, I can just sort of briefly hum it here. That's Saber Dance. So Saber Dance has been used in popular culture in lots of different contexts.
Totally.
Other than Hudsucker Proxy, The Simpsons used it in an episode. If you remember when Grandpa Simpson falls asleep watching the kids, Bart steals his teeth and he attaches his teeth to the ceiling fan and he's flying around. That's the music that's playing.
Nice.
The Coen Brothers use it in a really interesting sequence. Our hero, Norval Barnes, played by Tim Robbins, has an invention.
Okay.
He's been carrying around the design for this invention everywhere he goes, and he pulls it out anytime he wants to impress somebody about this great idea he has. And what he has is a piece of paper that has a circle on it. That's it. And he'll look at you with it and say, for kids. And people, of course, look at him like, what is wrong with this guy? Well, it turns out that his idea, this piece of paper, is actually the hula hoop. So in our fantasy, he is the creator of the hula hoop.
Okay.
Well, at first, the hula hoops, it doesn't sell in stores because people don't know what to make of this plastic ringed thingamabob.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's until a child comes across one, or as it sort of plays out in the scene, the hula hoop finds the child. Basically, the store owner, he tosses out all these hula hoops he can't sell. And one of them starts rolling down the street and around the corner, and because as hula hoops are wont to do, and finds its way to a child who figures out how to use it.
Okay.
What happens is they start with music from the ballet Spartacus, this one section that's a little lesser known section of that ballet, and then they transition into the Saber Dance. And the Saber Dance hits at a precise moment when the kid, surrounded by the hula hoop, he starts to use the hula hoop in a traditional way, and then he figures out really how to use it. And then all these kids show up that have just been let out of school wearing their Davy Crockett hats and everything. They all come across this kid who's hula hooping, and suddenly he starts hula hooping around his neck. And they're like totally baffled by this, blown away by it. And that's when Saber Dance hits, and they all run off into the store to buy their hula hoops.
Nice. Wasn't this also used in Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Almost certainly.
Yeah. It's a great piece. I've never known what that was called before.
I mentioned Spartacus.
Yeah.
So Spartacus was composed in 1954 and then was staged a couple of years later. It tells the story of the leader of the Roman slave uprising. Okay. It received the Lenin Prize for composition in 1954. Its most famous movement is also used, and used extensively in the Hudsucker Proxy. It's the Adagio of Spartacus and Phrygia. Okay. And it follows Spartacus, who rescues this slave woman, and it's this very romantic piece that follows their escape. Khachaturian arranged this and other music from the ballet for 4 orchestral suites, the Adagios in the second suite, and then the Coen Brothers used this music as sort of romantic shorthand. It has this slow and dramatic build-up, And you know when you sort of reach the apex in the music that our two lovers, Jennifer Jason Leigh and Tim Robbins, Norville and Amy Archer, through whatever conflict they've been through, they're going to come together in that Hollywood standard film classic moment where they embrace and kiss. It's perfect. And you'll hear that when we get to that moment in the music. So this is the very beginning of it. And at this very beginning, they use at the very beginning of the film. And they've got this great voiceover by actor Bill Cobbs, where he's talking about, 1955, and he tells this whole story, sort of sets you up for what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And again, even this part is sort of shorthand for this is going to be a fantasy. This is not all entirely real, but there's a great story here.
This music, it just lends itself so easily to use in a movie. It's so cinematic sounding. You can see the falling snow falling gently on New York and the giant clock of Khachaturian Industries at the top of the building. The arm of the clock is moving around. So great. And do you know when this was written, the music?
This was, again, composed in 1954.
Okay, right, you said that. Okay. It is very romantic, like sort of textbook romantic.
Yeah. I love this piece. I love this piece. So later in the film, the Adagio from Spartacus is used again to bring us to this romantic conclusion. What's happened in the film, I don't want to give too much away because I really want people to see this movie, but our hero, Norval Barnes, has risen to the presidency of Khachaturian Industries and then has fallen into despair, but gets a second chance.
Okay.
And then he runs off to find Jennifer Jason Leigh's Amy Archer, the love interest.
Yeah.
And the two of them are trying to find one another, and this is New Year's Eve. It's about to become a new year, 1955.
Yeah.
And the two find each other on the streets of New York, and they embrace just as the music swells to a great crescendo.
Yeah. So the Coen Brothers got a lot of mileage out of this one piece of music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it fits so beautifully within the story that they're telling. That is this, it's a fantasy tale, and the music is a fantasy, and everything about it is melodramatic and just reeks of old Hollywood, but in the best possible way.
Nice.
All right, so now we're starting to get the sense of the build-up. They're trying to find one another in New York.
Yeah.
He goes running off to find her in the beatnik bar. She comes out of the beatnik bar. They find themselves in this beatnik bar. And then they come together, and here comes the big embrace.
That's great.
And that great call and response between the strings and the horn.
Yeah. It's very melodramatic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's got so much movie music that was used in the 50s and early 60s had this sound, this very sort of warm string sound to it.
Yeah.
And it all has that feeling that I think the Coen Brothers were going for.
Yeah, and back in those days, of course, you were still in the days of the big studios, and they had their own orchestras, and they would do these like big, full, lush scores.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, so Khachaturian was right around that time period.
All right. So, Craig, unfortunately, we have talked so much that we've run out of time. We've only covered 1984 through 1994 in this episode, unbelievably.
Sorry about that.
So I think this is going to necessitate a part 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel honored.
This is only the second show that we've had to do a part 2 of. I don't know what that says about you.
It says that I ramble on and you are too polite to tell me, Craig, shut up. Let's move on.
It also says that this music is amazing and we both love the Coen Brothers, and so we're just going for it.
Absolutely.
I think. Yeah. So we haven't gotten to Fargo. We haven't gotten to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? So many great films still to go.
And this will also mean that in our next episode, we will talk a little bit about T-Bone Burnett and his collaboration with the Coen Brothers.
Can't wait. All right, everybody, that does it for this episode of Classical Classroom. For more Classroom, go to houstonpublicmedia.org/classroom. You'll find links to all of our social media there. Make sure to follow us with slavish devotion. Slavish devotion, that is hard to say. Email me at dclay@houstonpublicmedia.org. Subscribe to rate us and review us on iTunes. Thanks today to audio producer Todd Fink Holslander for twiddling knobs. Thanks to Mark DeClaudio for his assistance and his piercing hula hoop eyes. Thanks to Craig Cohen for being on the show today. Thanks to me for saying words. Thanks to you for being here. And why don't we freeze time, just like in that scene in the Hudsucker Proxy where Norval Barnes is frozen there in the air, and then the guy who's the angel
Charles
comes
Durning
down.
with the ukulele.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, we're going to freeze this episode just like that in midair. You can pick up and hear all about the other more recent films of the Coen Brothers in part 2 of our Coen Brothers extravaganza.
She'll be coming around the mountain, I said, coming around the mountain, oh yeah, coming around the mountain when she comes. Love that tune. How you doing, kid?
Mr. Hudsucker?